Great. We're live.
We're live.
Excellent. Excellent. For those who don't know, I'm Reid Hoffman. This is Ries. I'm, co-founder of LinkedIn, invested in a few companies, do a podcast, Possible, wrote a book, Super Agency, because I'm trying to, on the technological side, say how can people grab and enhance human agency as we go into more of an AI and, increasing technological age. And one of the things that I found delightful, part of the reason why we're doing this streaming event, is Eric is publishing a new book, Incorruptible, which is a fucking awesome book. Is the baseline of doing this. And when Eric first sent me the book and kind of Incorruptible, I was like, oh, okay, it's more, kind of long-term stock exchange, which is super important. I may be one of the, the people who, as opposed to the antagonist, were like, yeah, it's a really hard problem, but it's a good problem if you can solve it. And I was like, okay, we're going to talk mostly about long-term. But one of the things that I realized about reading this book was not just that it had the gravitas of a super important business book. It's kind of the built to last and kind of like, kind of how do you build these companies that really like endure and make a big difference for humanity, for society, not just for shareholders and employees, which is of course very important, but but it was also a kind of like, it had me thinking about like we're all trying to figure out how do we help capitalism evolve in the next century, and the kind of the humanist capitalism that was kind of running through the book was extremely important. And like the book has this gravitas of this really important business book, but also kind of in the last chapters, and it's worth going through the epilogue, kind of has a philosophical kind of like here is what we're trying to do as human beings. This is why companies and this form of capitalism is so important. And this is what you're trying to do to create a organization that outlives you, right? That endures, and that whose endurance is something that you be proud of. That endurance is a legacy. And it's like the Brian Chesky quote that you quoted, which is like, look, the company is the primary product because it's the thing that keeps offering the product and keeps going and adapting. So with this effusive praise and having made Eric
really
blush,
me now, yeah.
Right, I'm going to hand it over to say a little bit about like why you stepped down from being CEO of LTSE to write this book, and then what were some of the core things, and we'll go into various elements of the book as we're doing it. But like just kind of start with like, now that I've co-opted your book announcement, start with your book announcement.
Yeah. I have it here. Here it is. This is it. I'm very excited to share it for the first time. Can you see it in the camera? I can't tell. Anyway, gosh, Reid, that's an incredible way to start, and I'm kind of embarrassed now, but to try to live up to that praise, I'll do my best. But I thank you for being such a long-term supporter of these ideas. Yeah, as I think a lot of people know, I started this company called Long-Term Stock Exchange, the first new way of taking companies public since the creation of NASDAQ 50 years ago. And this book is an outgrowth, not just of that experience, but of really all the experiences that I've had over the last 20 years trying to build and scale companies and try to help other people find better ways to do it. And every time I keep deluding myself that I've found the most powerful force in the universe. So like when I remember when I first learned to program computers, I was like, programming is the most powerful force in the universe. And then I learned technology. I was like, no, technology platforms are the most powerful force in the universe. And as you say, as one thing I learned from Brad Chesky, that management is the most powerful force in the universe. Because when you need human beings, you need to have people who come together to make a platform. Otherwise, you don't have one. And yet all these years of helping people do this, I kept feeling like I was up against this other, even more powerful force, like a primordial force that I could not escape. And I helped quite a few companies. We would install like an incredible new management system, transform tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees. And then, we'd fall victim to boardroom shenanigans, or like an activist investor would show up, or even just the substitution of the stock price for the mission. Like these things would happen that would kind of like pull. I felt like it was like a force that was pulling organizations apart, pulling them down away from what they were really meant to be. And so I just spent a lot of years trying to figure out, why is this happening and what can we do about it? And obviously LTSC was one attempt to do something about it. And I'm very proud of what we've accomplished there. And I'm that's a company still in the early innings, despite how many years we've been at it. But at a certain point I was like, there's a, as you say, a philosophical problem here that has to be solved. It's not just something we can solve with a company. And so anyway, I started working on, wasn't even going to be a book at first. Just, I was like a arcane collector of unusual governance ideas and strange structured companies and kind of alternate operating systems. Like that, these certain companies seem to have these incredible tools that they use. And I started to use them in my own life and advising other companies and in my companies. And I was like, wow, there's something much more powerful here than I previously realized. And so, yeah, the last few years, I've basically been full time trying to wrangle this into book form and to practice it, because every day of my life, thanks to the Lean Startup, people come to me and they ask me for advice starting a company. And so I started talking to people about their mission, their vision, their purpose. And when most people hear that for the first time, they're like, oh no, some more ESG nonsense, whatever. Like purpose has become this like totally vague. And I was like, no, I'm not talking about some vague thing. I want to know, what does it say in your legal charter is your organizing principle? What does this company exist to do? And what's wild to me is most founders have never really thought about it. They've never even read their charter. They have no idea what it says. And so they don't realize that they have adopted accidentally a charter that says that their purpose is shareholder primacy. And one of my claims with this book is that the era of shareholder primacy is over. Like it has been a self-destructive idea that has basically run its course. And yet we haven't acknowledged it. Like we don't realize that it's over. We're still walking around with this like zombie idea in our minds. Yet the really great company builders have all actually, without realizing it, rejected it. They want to build things for some purpose, as you say, to serve humanity, to make the world a better place. And some of them do that in grandiose language. Like they're like, ooh, I want to solve the climate crisis. Or I want to, I would like to think about, the Anthropic guys being like, we're going to do this for the benefit of all humanity. Like that's in the charter. But a lot of companies are just like, I just want to build a great product. I just want to make the world a little bit more efficient. I want to make customers' lives better. And people don't realize that just that statement is already an incredibly radical act in today's highly financialized economy. So what I wanted to do was like put it all into one place, both the history of like, how did we get here and why are things this way? But more importantly, what are the practical things we can do, starting from like the innermost thing most under our control and leading all the way up to the really thorny questions of investor relations and boards and, all that kind of stuff. And as you say, to the world beyond, like not just to be a manifesto and a like rah, we should do something, but no, like let's actually put a stake in the ground. What is this new era of capitalism actually going to be about? And what tools do we have at our disposal right now to bring it into fruition? So we don't have to wait for some legislative action, or to wait for the world to be more perfect or whatever. No, using the tools of the world as it exists today. What can organizations and leaders and boards and customers and employees, everybody, what can we all do to make this happen? And this is my attempt to answer that question.
Well, and part of the delight of reading the book, by the way, I'm also a Costco fan. Costco Center, has a reoccurring character role in the book.
Oh yes,
one of the heroes. But like it also, as you're saying, is kind of the history. Like there's a story about a mill company, and like it really did the research on all of this all the way to modern. And one of the things that I was telling you in a little bit of our preamble, and I say this in part so that the people listening to this understand why the value of reading this book. Like I learned some things about how I want to write my future books from your book, because you did this perfect thing of making the book personal. Like, e.g., there's Eric's story and LTSE's story that hits there and bits, and where you've hit some of these problems and how you're navigating them and the kind of near-death things. With the human part of the story, it's like emotionally connected, emotionally there, but the story's not about you. Right.
That's right.
And like I'd always resisted, in Super Agency and in the earlier books, putting much of myself in the story, despite a bunch of advice to doing it, because I was like, look, it's not about me.
Not about me, exactly.
It's about this. And it was like, and I was, I finally got it. Like, this is how you can include you and it not being about you. And so that characteristic of the book is delightful. And so it's not just an important book to read, but it's also a moving and there's a part of it that's literature in that too, which is very, very atypical for serious business books. Now, and I do think that one of kind of the driving theme is not just kind of long-term versus short-term, isn't just kind of governance mechanism, isn't just kind of like the company is the product and what are you doing, and it's like by the way, we have a bunch of these governance mechanisms today, and it isn't this kind of hack of, well, I just get dual class for as long as I'm there, which
Totally.
works sometimes and works not other times. And part of LTSE was to say, hey, how do we make the hack on the shareholder mechanism to be inclusive and broad for people who are long term, which is a baseline thing to do. Now, human nature, kind of agent principle problems and everything else.
Oh yeah.
Always gets you to short-term hacks, just like your LTSE. So part of the thing you have to do is and this is, I think, why you titled the book Incorruptible, because it's there's going to be a lot of pressures to try to go to short-term hacks, which will eventually, at minimum, corrupt your mission and maybe corrupt and kill the company. The company may have enough structural position and network effects or other kinds of things that fine, the mission gets corrupted some, but the organization continues. But of course, the mission is part of what is, one of, I was reminded of two kind of classic Silicon Valley, kind of aphorisms that people don't realize are an important part of Silicon Valley, because there's all this controversy around is Silicon Valley just trying to make big tech companies to make themselves a lot of money and that's it. One of them is missionaries, not mercenaries, right? Which is there's a bunch of people in Silicon Valley who are like, no, we're actually legitimate, despite HBO mockery, which is fun. We are in fact
deserve. So yeah,
yes, exactly. And there's a bunch that deserves it. I mean, it's not to say the Silicon Valley show was was on point on a number of things, but also it's kind of like we have this thing which I think was before Jobs, but Jobs would say is A players hire A players, B players hire C players. And I was kind of thinking as I was reading your book, is A companies stay A companies and B companies become C companies as part of the these kind of these aphorisms. Now, so here, I didn't prep you for this because I thought it would be fun for our audience. Because, and I'm, by the way, so I just in the last couple of days, read the book. So I don't have a point of view on this yet myself, but I was like, I wonder if you put Incorruptible and Blitzscaling, in a cage match together, what the evolution would be.
Oh, totally.
And I'm sure you've given it some thought. So I'm going to ask you as the question first. I was thinking, there's some things I really believe about Blitzscaling, but there's some things I'd really love to update Blitzscaling about, given that I'm reading, Incorruptible. What's your theory of those two together? Because Blitzscaling was my own, this is how Silicon Valley and China, as being the only two places in the world that are resolutely building the new global technology companies.
Yeah.
It was my lessons for that. So how would you
I love the idea of putting them in a blender and see what emerges. No, I thought about that a lot actually, because and I'll maybe give two answers. The first is, there's a quote from Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, in the book, and he said there's two kinds of growth. There's growth that makes you fat and growth that makes you strong. And we choose strength, something like that.
Yep.
And I really thought that was smart, because there's situations, and this is why people get confused. They're like, well, is growth good? It's like, well, that really depends. There are situations where in order to achieve the mission, you have to have scale. Otherwise you're vulnerable. And that's a part of the lesson of Blitzscaling is even if you don't want to grow, if you're up against an unlimited or resource deep pocket, it can be very dangerous. And yet we also have these stories in the literature of the smaller company vanquishing the larger company. I think about, I remember growing up thinking that the old Microsoft, not the new soft and cuddly Microsoft, I'm talking about the old Microsoft. I was an intern there like many, many years ago. I know what the old Microsoft was like.
Back when it was like, we eat people for breakfast.
Oh, totally. And they were like ruthless and proud of it. This is pre-antitrust trial. This is pre-everything. Okay. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing Scott Cook tell me the story of when they tried to buy Intuit. And they showed up to Intuit and they were like, listen, you have to sell to us or we're going to, nuke you from orbit. We're going to start our own, Intuit competitor. We're going to give it away for free with Windows. Like we're going to, and most companies when faced with that onslaught, don't even try to fight. They're like, oh yeah, we obviously are hopeless. Like, obviously just do whatever they want.
By the way, specifically what Eric's referring to, because this may be earlier than some people were born who were listening to this, is the technique that Microsoft would show up to do when they say, hey, we want to enter this market. They'd show up to the leading company, in this case Intuit, and they'd say, we can build a copy of your product for free, and we can distribute it in all our channels, including Windows, for free. And this will kill you. So this will bring your market cap to this. So we're going to offer you this to buy you.
Better than the alternative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is better than just dying.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, not in Microsoft's current playbook, thankfully.
No. Satya and the team is like, no, we earn it by being good to customers. Very, very much closer to the enduring Incorruptible.
Oh yeah, exactly. And in fact, the old Microsoft ran into significant problems because the trustworthiness that you erode through this kind of behavior eventually catches up with you. But anyway, Intuit said no. I think maybe one of the only companies of that era that just flat out defied and said no, we'll outcompete you, and did. Because so it's like you don't necessarily have to be big to achieve the mission. You have to have this kind of, I call it the force of magnetic alignment in the book. There's this special property that happens when every resource that a company can command is aligned towards achieving the long-term mission. It's employees, every dollar, every employee, every customer relationship, every policy, everything is in alignment. And people so often say to me, well, I tried being good one time. I aligned 1 of 7 things and it didn't do anything for me. And that's like someone who's like, yeah, I went to the gym one day. It's like, oh, really? Oh, good for you. I'm so quite, but you're not going to tell me that that's not a path to fitness. You don't know. The truth is you don't know. So that's the first thing. The second thing I was going to say, by the way, just in defense of blitzscaling, a lot of people misunderstand the story of blitzscaling. And I remember, I think I even tell the story in the book, that I remember when this is before the term had been coined. Every once in a while, when you're doing a startup, if you do it long enough, you'll go through these hype cycles where the thing you're doing is in hype, and then you'll be doing it when it's out of hype. And if you live long enough, you'll live multiple of these cycles. And I was working in virtual reality and avatars and stuff way before metaverse, way before anyone was and I remember when it was in a down, we did it in a down cycle, and then it went into an up cycle, and we went through that. And in the up cycle, you would often have the VCs on your board come to you. You come to a board meeting and they're like, this other competitor just raised an ungodly amount of money and they're going to spend it like crazy. We have to match them or we're going to be spent into oblivion. And the first couple of times I ever had that experience, I was geared up for war. Okay, we got to do it. And then of course, if you do this long enough, you see those companies spend themselves to death. Because raising too much money is just as lethal as not having not enough money, as you well know. And I think what's sad is that now sometimes people use blitzscaling for that phenomenon. It's just listen, just setting a pile of money on fire.
That doesn't get you anywhere.
It doesn't get you anywhere. And I think that to me is really the essence. Really, this goes all the way back to lean startup, that going fast is not just a measure of raw speed. It's also a question of direction. It's a vector, for my physics colleagues. If you're going in the right direction and you have high acceleration, good things can happen to you. But if you're going in a circle, you could also have very high acceleration while you're circling the drain. So I think to me, the book is really about the skeleton. If you're going to do blitzscaling or some other kind of high intensity, high mission, high octane, high growth plan, you have to build a vehicle that is strong enough to withstand the shearing forces that you're inevitably going to encounter. And I think just in general, although old Silicon Valley had a lot of these aphorisms about mission and its importance, that has really fallen to the wayside, sadly, I think, in the way we're teaching founders, to their great detriment. And I won't say who, but I was talking to one of the OGs of Silicon Valley, one of the original, of the modern era of venture capitalists. And he was bemoaning it to me. He's made more money than you can possibly imagine at this. And he was like, look, I feel like all the missionaries are gone. It's, like there's so much activity going on now. There's all this mercenary activity. And he said something very prophetic to me. This is a little while ago. He said, look, these guys don't understand that they're actually undermining the fabric that makes Silicon Valley work.
Yes.
So they're going to burn the whole thing to the ground if they're not careful. And that's kind of one of the lessons of the book, not just about Silicon Valley, but about our modern economic system in general, is that, it tends to self-devour if not channeled properly. And, I'm not by no means the first person to have this recognition. If you read the notes, there's a great quote from Schumpeter. Schumpeter predicted all this in the 30s. Incredible to me that he was like, yeah, capitalism inevitably it swallows the civic society institutions it needs to support itself. And he just reported it like a matter of fact, like everybody knows that happens. I'm like, hey, but we're living it right now. So any advice, my friend, about what to do about it? And I just
gotta be in here somewhere.
Yeah, I was like scouring the book, like someone's got advice for it. And I just feel like we're in this moment where we're on our own. Like we have to take all this wisdom, ancient wisdom, medieval wisdom, modern wisdom, Silicon Valley, with all these sources of wisdom about this problem. But we, because of the changing in technology and the new possibilities, we have to forge our own new way, kind of like our grandparents did. When they forged the modern world that we still enjoy the last vestiges of. And I think, hopefully our grandchildren will appreciate that we took the time and the pain to do it.
Well, one of the things that's kind of a very common discussion right now is around, capitalism, right? Like one of the things I find pretty irksome coming out of kind of universities, young critics, is they're anti-capitalist. And you're like, well, look, the question is, what's a better idea, right? Like, I'm perfectly good with hearing a better idea. I'd love to hear a better idea. I always love, whether it's a company, a book, a better idea is always awesome. And by the way, if you have a better idea, like being anti-capitalist is not a better idea. And what most of these bozos haven't really done is kind of read the history of capitalism and say, look, we tune it. It isn't that it's like this one perfect thing. We tune it. And so, like, oh, we should have labor laws. We should have no child labor laws. We should have some market regulation. Markets don't occur in nature. They occur in societies. And we have some way of doing this. And so capitalism, as its enormous productivity good, has come through being tuned. And part of what I think was is great about Incorruptible is say, look, here are some new tunings that might very well help capitalism be what we need for more humanist society in this kind of like, answering some of these, creative destruction should better, kind of issues. And I think it's one of the reasons why, the book's super important. Very glad you spent years writing it. Thank you. I think we appreciate it. And we only have a few more minutes here, like maybe 5, 10, whatever. But but like one of the things that I think is an interesting thing to note for the missionaries, the company builders, because they still do exist in the Valley.
Oh yeah.
It is less the noisy, it's less the get rich quick scheme, kind of long term. You can see kind of who is really building kind of with more long term. You can see, one of the things over the last 8 years and the whole social media thing I've been arguing is like we have to think of society as a stakeholder and customer too. So it's not just what do I do for individuals who are my customers, what I do for companies and my customers, what I do for my employees, what I do for my shareholders, but also what do I do within my community and society. And I think it's putting these together, and part of it may be evolution's the shareholder mechanism, hence LTSE, etc. But one of the notes that I was taking is there's this kind of like, as debate between culture and strategy in Silicon Valley. And like, people will say culture eats strategy for breakfast, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, culture is super important. That's not the blah, blah, blah was not any one thing. And like one of the things, we learned is like, oh, you have to be more intentional about your company culture. Some of the really good ways of doing it, like Netflix and Reid Hastings and other things are doing this, and writing down your culture and making sure your culture is where your kind of entry-level employee can even hold the CEO accountable, because we're all like, we have this shared culture where you say, whoa, and that's part of the reason why, like at LinkedIn, we did members first. It's like our unpaid free member is our primary customer, right? As kind of a way of navigating for kind of like enduring the long term. Now, one of the thoughts I had when I was reading, now there's points, but good company culture is insufficient, right? It's good, but insufficient. Now, in the 3M, hero case, which you cover, it has a certain, kind of resilience. Like that's one of the reasons why it's good. But say a little bit to the Silicon Valley discussion of this is the stuff in addition to good culture.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that question. And I tried really hard. This was extremely difficult. I tried to write this whole book without using the word stakeholder and without using the word culture. It's actually super hard to talk about these things without those terms, but I felt like both of those terms have become so overused and mean so many different things, so many different people. It was hard to be precise in my meanings with those things. So instead of talking about stakeholders, I talk about fiduciaries. It's a very old-fashioned book. We used to talk about fiduciary duties as meaning much more than just our obligation to shareholders, and I trace all that history. And for culture, instead of using the word culture, I use the word ethos, because ethos is more like character. Like the habits of character. This is what Aristotle used to talk about, like what makes a person that person. And so what's interesting to me is that Silicon Valley, we talk about culture and strategy as if they were separable elements, as if you could take the same culture company and change its strategy. But again, think about that in the context of Patagonia. Imagine a new CEO comes into Patagonia and says, we want to keep the same culture, but we're not environmentalists anymore. Now we're all about microwaves or whatever. Like, it's laughable to think that that would be possible. And conversely, like, only certain strategies are only pursuable by a highly aligned, highly talented kind of company. So you can't just be like, oh, I want to pursue this super ambitious thing. I want to attract super ambitious people, but our culture sucks. Like, no way. That goes back to the Jobs quote that you mentioned. So what I tried to talk about, I call this the physics of organizations, like to get underneath the emergent properties of these living things we call organizations. What's like the equivalent of the DNA that you set that then culture and strategy both emerge from. And that to me really is what the Incorruptible blueprint is about. It's like, how do we create a structure? And I have terms for this. Like, we have, instead of calling it a strategy, I talk about something called mission drive. How do we instill in the organism this longing to get to the place we want to go, and the willingness to reject any way of making money that is not taking us where we want to go, which most companies simply cannot resist the temptation. And similarly, how do we create the strength to be principled in defense of our way of working? And in fact, the best leaders, what I learned studying this and living it myself, this really surprised me. It's a principle I call harder is easier. The very best leaders have these like really outrageously difficult principles. Think about Steve Jobs' commitment to quality, right? Like, I remember being upset because the wires on the inside of the unopenable Mac Plus were not arranged in an aesthetically pleasing way. No customer could ever see it, but it was a principle thing. Yvon Chouinard was just like that at Patagonia. There's some very funny stories in the book about him, like lecturing people about the nature of quality. He thought quality was an objective characteristic, not a subjective thing, which is like, it's nuts to say that kind of thing. Anyway, so many stories like that in the book. And these you mentioned Costco. Costco's like a classic example, right? If you raise the price of the hot dog, I will effing kill you. So they have these principles that are really inconvenient. And yet they don't complain about how the world forces them into difficult trade-offs. They welcome it. They relish the difficulty because it gives them an opportunity to teach the principle. And in that dynamic tension between reality and the principle, often the breakthrough solutions occur. And so I talk about that a lot in the book. Let me connect that back to what you were saying about capitalism, if you don't mind.
Please.
Because I appreciate you talking about that. And I understand why you're getting grief from younger people with that. Because
we, by the way, we company people.
No, everybody is. Because, and rightfully so, because young people have lived through, nothing but an era of institutional collapse. So I think there's actually two capitalisms. There's like the capitalism of the theoretical idea that it's about value creation and has this moral foundation that it leaves everybody better off through voluntary, uncoerced transactions. Talk about this a lot in the book. And then there's this other capitalism that is like about something really much darker. Like, I think it's almost like the ghost in the machine left over from all our years of slavery. Like, we haven't quite expunged it. You see it, someone shows up in like terms like human resources, which always make me so uncomfortable. So anyway, I showed the
human capital.
Say again?
Yeah. Or human capital.
Human capital. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Either all capital is human, or you're talking about something very dark. Yes. Very dark.
Yeah.
So I showed the book to a lot of test readers, to get it right. Because the early drafts were basically unreadable. So I'm so flattered to say that you enjoyed it. I mean, that was just like really, but really worked hard at it.
Yeah.
And one of the people I showed it to was an economics professor at the University of Chicago,
Mm.
who gave me great feedback. He was actually super helpful in giving the feedback, but he also kind of gave me a pretty long lecture about how he's like, look, you're being way too negative on capitalism. The private equity guys are actually great. He has all this data. There's so much data about this. It's like, these guys actually add value. You say they don't, like, he's like really giving me a hard time about it. I was like, listen, my friend, with all respect, you react that way, but I've had a lot of younger readers read this, Gen Z and younger. And every single one of them has reacted the same way. Several of them said to me, literally verbatim, this is the first book I've ever read in my life that defends capitalism.
Yep,
So
exactly.
you think I'm attacking capitalism and they think I'm defending it, but the word capitalism rarely appears in this book. So what's really happening is people are projecting onto the book their pre-existing ideas about which team you're supposed to be on. And the book is not political. It is not written to take sides. Like, it is really a from first principles exploration of what does it mean to be a for-profit company? What does it mean to make a profit? And because I know we have to wrap up pretty soon, I'll leave with one last idea from the book. I believe that literally to make a profit means to maximize human flourishing.
Hmm.
That's not like a double bottom line, triple bottom line, nice to have commitment. If you study the history of profit, you'll discover that almost everyone who's looked at it has had to break profit up into components. Fred Reichfeld has this great book about good profits versus bad profits. And, a Ponzi scheme is bad profit, but like something, making a widget and selling it with a premium margin, that's good profit. If you study externalities, if you have a ton of negative externalities, that's bad profit. But if you get lots of positive externalities, that's good profit. And what my real breakthrough to understand all these ideas was simply to see like, oh, that's wrong. We've internalized, because of the shareholder primacy stuff, we've internalized this idea that we have to have the one metric that matters and everything aligns to that one metric. And that metric has to be exploitative money making by whatever means necessary. And I think that was just a civilization level wrong turn. Actually, you can't put profits over people. It's impossible, because profit is about human flourishing. And so when you do a transaction that just moves value around, you steal it from the future and bring it to the present, you move it from one stakeholder to another, but you don't create any net new value. We as builders don't have to honor that. We can just say, you know what? That's not really what capitalism is supposed to be about. We're supposed to be creating net new value. And so one of that to me, like, that might sound some people like a little bit radical, but it really has been the element behind the most successful companies in history. The ones that like you really can, you work there, you can go home and sleep well at night. That's what's happening, is they have identified some deeper underlying principle about like, what are we really trying to do for people? And really that's the heart of the book.
Well, we're going to end in a minute, or two, but I will do one teaser through the thing, which is one of the lines that I think you appropriated well from other description into some thinking about building these companies and some thinking about capitalism is, you're not stuck in traffic, you are the traffic. And I think that we won't explain what that is, because that will get people to go, wait a minute, that's interesting. Let me go open the book.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, spoiler alert.
And take a look. Now, are there also some other things? I think the link to order is going to be in the chat. Is there anything else? Like, there's some bonuses.
Oh, things? Yeah. Let me plug it off for a second. Yeah. So first of all, the website is incorruptible.co. So Incorruptible company, that's our goal. It's up on the screen. Obviously, you can get the book on Amazon and anywhere else you order bookstores. I highly recommend everybody, please buy it from your local independent bookstores. Independent bookstores are having such a hard time right now. They're such important community spaces. If you go on the website, I have lists of all the local bookstores that carry the book. So if you find your local bookstore, just buy it from them. Of course, you can buy it from Amazon or anywhere else. You can get it in an ebook, audiobook, all the forms. This is going to be a traditionally published book. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster, published by our mutual friends at Authors Equity, pioneers in their own right. And
the startup publisher, they're really cool.
They're really cool, super cool, best of both worlds between a startup publisher and yet all the best of traditional publishing. It's funny because for me, they're a brand new publisher, and yet many of the people who work there are people who worked with me on the Lean Startup. So it's actually been like returning home, but to a cool new thing. So yeah, very grateful to them for their work on this book. But yes, there's a whole bunch of pre-order bonuses. Like, look, for people who don't know, Reid, you obviously know. But if you don't know, like authors depend on pre-orders for everything. Like you can't understand how valuable it is. If you ever want to do a favor to an author, like pre-order their book, because ultimately pre-orders are what drive all the algorithms and rankings and all kinds of stuff that happens downstream. So if you like a book, if you want to see its message, amplified in the world, please do pre-order. We've put a whole bunch of bonuses on the website. You can get a secret chapter that got cut from the book. We're going to do a bunch of events and author Q&As. You get early access.
Wait, I don't have that secret chapter. I'm going to have to go get this.
Well, Reid, you're going to have to pre-order. What can I say? That's how it goes. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, we have reader's guides and implementation guides for people who want to do this stuff. A lot of cool stuff available as bonuses. And as we roll out more in-person events, pre-readers are going to get special invites and tickets and stuff for that stuff. So it'll be well worth your while. To pre-order, all you have to do is pre-order on whatever form you want, and you can just upload your receipt to the website and unlock the bonuses. We have an Incorruptible community of people who are into these ideas. You can get access to that. So we've really tried to make pre-ordering as good as we can. And for those that are staying tuned, I'll just tease one more thing. There's a lot of chocolate in this book for some reason. I'm not sure why. Like, I think just a lot of the case studies involve confectionery and chocolate. It's like, so the illustrations are quite delicious if you like chocolate. And anyway, so we were working on a special pre-order bundle that will involve chocolate. So if you want to get on the mailing list and find out about this, we're not quite ready to announce it, but there'll be chocolate themed things you'll want to know about. So sign up for the mailing list if you want to know more.
Did I give you my Cocoa Runners chocolate gift?
Not this year.
Well, but it was a couple years back.
Yeah, a couple years ago. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. No, I know a whole bunch of stuff about chocolate, and there's this, the Reid Hoffman chocolate collection, which is available. You can buy it online from Cocoa Runners. But like, because I went to the company, I said I want this to ship to my friends.
Yeah,
so the
exactly.
Thing was very funny.
So, yes. Well, and good. There's nothing like good chocolate too. Yeah.
It's very healthy. Extremely tasty, long, interesting history. By the way, getting the growing of the beans and all the rest is kind of a classic, almost like Patagonia kind of issues. Getting, there's good and bad and heroes and villains, and the history of chocolate on this stuff is fascinating. So I will do the final thing for the people who I hope have stuck around through the, hey, this is important. I agree with everything Eric said. Pre-order the book. Eric and I will undoubtedly do this conversation about what AI means on this sometime in the next month or two. Right. So, because we didn't even get there because of how important this was. And as everyone knows, everyone, Eric, me, the whole thing, AI is an important, kind of tsunami that's coming into corporations and the work world. What does the new corporation look like given AI? But we will tease that to another time. And I cannot recommend this book more strongly. And, pre-ordering it is great.
Thanks, Reid. Really appreciate taking the time, and thanks for the kind words. It means a lot to me. Thanks for your advocacy, and just thanks for your courage and always speaking up for what's right.